I'm Sophia, 29 years old, and on the day of my brother's $400,000 wedding, my stepmother took the microphone and announced she was the rightful owner of my father's $18 million fortune. After years of protecting my father's legacy, managing the company, while he was sick and holding the family together when no one else would, I truly believed his wishes would be honored. I thought this wedding would be a rare moment of peace, a celebration of the family he left behind. But instead, in front of 300 elegantly dressed guests, she humiliated me. She called me just a daughter from the first marriage, someone with no real rights to his estate, his company, or even his name. She thought she'd won. She thought she could erase me with a single speech. What she didn't know was that I had been waiting for this exact moment with every piece of evidence ready. They wanted a show I gave them, one they will never forget. Sophia grew up surrounded by everything money could buy, yet the house always felt cold. Her father, Richard Whitmore, was a man who built an $18 million empire from nothing, a self-made entrepreneur who believed loyalty was everything and hard work was the only currency that mattered. He wasn't affectionate in the way most fathers were, but his presence was steady. His words carried weight, and Sophia always knew he valued honesty and discipline. Her childhood changed forever when she was 12. Her mother Grace died suddenly of an illness, leaving Sophia with a hollow grief she couldn't fully understand at that age. She grew up faster than she should have, learning to handle herself with composure even when she felt alone. For a while it was just her and her father in that vast, echoing mansion, two people silently trying to move on. But then Vanessa arrived. Vanessa was everything her late mother wasn't. Glamorous, magnetic, always at the center of attention. She was 20 years younger than Richard and carried herself with the air of someone who knew exactly how to play the long game. Sophia remembered the first time she met her, the way Vanessa's eyes swept over her, smiling sweetly, but assessing, calculating. Within months, Richard had remarried, and Vanessa moved into the house like she had always belonged there. At first, Sophia tried to be polite. She wanted her father to be happy again, to have some kind of warmth back in his life. But it didn't take long for her to see Vanessa's true colors. She was charming in public, always saying the right things at the right time. But in private, she was sharp and dismissive, constantly making subtle comments that undermined Sophia's place in the family. "She's too sensitive to handle the business," Vanessa would murmur at dinner parties. "She should focus on her own life, maybe settle down. Running a company is too heavy for her." Or when Richard was in the room, "Sophia's sweet, but she doesn't have the edge you need in this world. You should think about the future, about someone who can carry your legacy." Sophia's father never directly contradicted Vanessa, but Sophia could see the flicker of discomfort in his eyes. He still loved her, but he didn't stop Vanessa from slowly taking over the social dynamics of the family. Then Ethan was born. Sophia's half-brother came into the world with every privilege imaginable. From the moment he could walk, Vanessa treated him like royalty. The mansion became his playground. He had nannies, tutors, and designer clothes even as a child. Richard adored Ethan too, but his love for his youngest child was quieter, more reserved. Vanessa, however, made it clear that Ethan was the crown jewel of the family. As Ethan grew older, the contrast between them became impossible to ignore. Ethan's birthdays were extravagant affairs with imported cakes, circus performers, and media coverage. Sophia's was a quiet dinner at home, sometimes not even acknowledged beyond a simple happy birthday. By the time Ethan turned 18, he had a luxury sports car parked in the driveway, a trust fund waiting for him, and a private university education fully arranged. Sophia, on the other hand, was told she needed to earn her place in the family business. She wasn't handed anything. She worked through school, took internships, and spent long hours learning the ins and outs of the empire her father had built. And yet every time she tried to take initiative, Vanessa would find a way to belittle her. "Don't push yourself too much," Vanessa would say with that fake smile. "Not everyone is cut out for big decisions. Some people are better at staying in the background." Richard remained a silent anchor. Though he didn't always defend Sophia openly in private moments, he reassured her. "Don't let her words get to you. You have the strength for this. You're the one who truly understands what I've built." Then Richard fell ill. It started with small things, fatigue, dizziness, but soon became a battle with a disease that left him bedridden. And in that moment, Sophia stepped up without hesitation. She managed his appointments, coordinated with doctors, and at the same time ran the day-to-day operations of the company. Vanessa. She was too busy hosting charity galas and high-profile luncheons using Richard's name to bolster her social standing. She made appearances at the hospital for photo ops, but she never stayed through the hard nights, never asked about the spreadsheets or the contracts. Sophia was the one sitting by Richard's bed late at night. She was the one holding his hand when he had trouble breathing. And in those quiet hours, when Vanessa and Ethan were nowhere to be seen, Richard would look at her with tired but steady eyes and whisper, "You're the only one I trust to keep this family together. You'll know what to do when I'm gone." But even during those moments of trust, Vanessa was plotting. She began having private meetings with the family lawyer. She took Ethan on unexplained important errands, always avoiding Sophia's questions. Documents started disappearing from Richard's study. When Sophia asked the lawyer about updates to the will, he gave vague, dismissive answers. Sophia felt the walls closing in. She would catch Vanessa and Ethan exchanging knowing looks. She overheard conversations that stopped the moment she entered the room. And once late at night, she heard Vanessa's voice through the slightly open door of her private lounge. "It's all arranged. When the time comes, Ethan will have everything. Sophia won't be able to do a thing about it." Ethan laughed. "She's never been a threat. She's just the leftover from the first marriage." Sophia froze outside that door, her blood running cold. She wanted to storm in and confront them, but something held her back. She needed to know more. She needed to understand just how far they were willing to go. From that moment, Sophia started watching more closely. She noticed that the lawyer who used to be warm and friendly now avoided her calls. She saw Ethan becoming more emboldened, talking openly about his future as the head of the Whitmore empire. Vanessa became more distant but more powerful in the household, controlling the staff, the finances, and the flow of information. It was no longer subtle. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan. And Sophia realized the drama didn't begin with her father's illness. It had been quietly building for years, layer by layer, like a storm gathering force. The favoritism, the manipulation, the small acts of erasure, they were all seeds Vanessa had planted long ago. Now, with her father's health failing and his voice growing weaker, Vanessa was finally ready to harvest what she believed was hers. Sophia felt it in her bones. Something was coming. Sophia's life in her 20s was not like the life of other young women her age. While her peers were traveling the world, building careers of their own, and starting families, she was in boardrooms, hospitals, and late-night conference calls. She had enrolled in business management, not because it was her passion, but because she knew the family empire needed someone who actually understood how to keep it alive. While Vanessa jetted off to Monaco for summer galas, and Ethan posted endless photos from luxury suites in Paris, Sophia sat in the dim light of her office crunching numbers and reviewing contracts. She became the quiet force holding everything together during economic downturns, smoothing over crises that would have ruined the Whitmore name had they been mishandled. There were nights when she didn't leave the office until dawn, only to head straight to the hospital to check on her father before collapsing for a few hours of restless sleep. She sacrificed so much she barely noticed the years slipping by. She stopped accepting invitations to social events because she was too busy keeping the company stable. Friends drifted away. Relationships faded before they could grow serious because no one wanted to compete with the constant demands of her family. She had once dreamed of living abroad for a year, of maybe starting her own consultancy, of finding love that felt like a partnership instead of a burden. But every time she thought about stepping away, she'd remember her father's tired eyes and his soft voice. "You're the only one I can trust with this." Even when the hospital bills became overwhelming, she didn't hesitate to dip into her personal savings. Vanessa had rolled her eyes when Sophia suggested using the family accounts. Richard wouldn't want to drain the company for this. "It's too expensive," she'd said coldly, as if Richard's life wasn't worth the inconvenience. Ethan simply shrugged. "Isn't that what you're here for? You're the responsible one." And so Sophia paid. She paid with her time, her energy, her money, and her youth. Meanwhile, Ethan was living like royalty. He hosted lavish parties that filled the mansion with strangers. He wrecked 2 sports cars in a single year and simply called for replacements. He spent money freely, signed nothing, learned nothing. Yet he walked through life with the smug certainty of someone who believed the world would always bend for him. Vanessa encouraged it. She'd pat Ethan's hand at the dinner table and smile, saying, "You're the true future of this family. You have the charisma, the charm. Sophia's just too serious. She doesn't know how to inspire people. She's meant for the background." Sophia swallowed the humiliation time and time again because she believed her father's promises. When Richard had enough strength to speak, he would look at her and say, "Everything I built will be yours to protect. You're the only one who understands what it means to work for it." Those words were the anchor that kept her going. But as his illness deepened, strange things began to happen. Vanessa's visits to the family lawyer grew more frequent, always without explanation. Sophia would return from long meetings at the office to find Vanessa leaving the study with Ethan in tow, folders tucked under her arm. When she asked, Vanessa would wave her off with a dismissive smile. "Just boring paperwork. Nothing you need to worry about." Then there were the whispers. Late at night, as Sophia passed Vanessa's private lounge, she heard her stepmother's voice low and sharp. "Don't worry, Ethan. She won't have any claim. I'm making sure of it." Ethan's laugh followed. "Good. She's been playing the dutiful daughter long enough. It's time she learned her place." Sophia froze in the hallway, gripping the edge of the wall until her knuckles went white. For a moment, she thought about barging in, demanding answers. But something in her told her it wasn't the right time. She needed to understand the full scope of what they were doing before making a move, so she said nothing. She told herself it couldn't be that bad. Surely when the time came, the will would show her father's true intentions. Surely he wouldn't let Vanessa erase her. When Richard finally passed, Sophia was the one who stayed at his bedside until the very last breath. She was the one who made the phone calls, organized the funeral, and greeted the endless line of mourners. Vanessa wept dramatically for the cameras, but spent most of the funeral reception mingling with wealthy guests, turning grief into an opportunity for networking. Ethan made a brief appearance, posted a photo of the casket on social media with a half-hearted caption about remembering Dad, and then vanished before the ceremony ended. Sophia felt hollow, but she told herself the hard part was over. The company would stabilize, the will would be read, and her father's legacy would be protected as he wanted. Except the will reading never came. At first, it was just a small delay. The lawyer said he was still gathering paperwork. Then another week passed, and another. Sophia called again and again, but the lawyer's tone grew colder each time. "It's complicated," he would say. "Your stepmother is handling it. Be patient." Vanessa kept her composure, smiling like nothing was wrong. "Don't worry yourself, dear. Everything will be fine. Your father wanted what's best for the family." But weeks turned into months. The tension became unbearable. Sophia's gut told her something was wrong. The lawyer, who had once been transparent, was now evasive. Documents she needed for the company accounts went missing. Vanessa was throwing even more lavish parties, acting as if the future was already hers to command. Ethan began talking openly about his plans for the empire, giving interviews about the next chapter of the Whitmore legacy, as if Sophia didn't even exist. The ground was shifting under her feet, and she could feel it. And yet, she stayed silent. She still clung to her father's words like a lifeline. "You're the only one I trust. Everything I built will be yours." But deep inside, a storm was gathering. She didn't know when the breaking point would come. She only knew it was coming. ChatGPT deny. After the funeral, the mansion felt strangely alive again, but not in the way grief sometimes softens into healing. It was as if a dark, heavy curtain had been pulled away, revealing Vanessa and Ethan in their truest form. They weren't grieving anymore. They were thriving. Within days, Vanessa was hosting intimate dinner parties with the city's elite, her laughter echoing through the same halls where Richard's portrait still hung. She invited wealthy acquaintances, lawyers, and socialites into the home, as if it were already her own kingdom. Ethan, dressed in tailored suits and expensive watches, paraded around like he had been waiting for this exact moment. He talked loudly about the future, tossing around phrases like, "When I take over and once the company is fully under my name." It was as though they'd been holding their breath for years, and now without Richard, they were free to claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. Sophia watched it unfold with growing unease. The first sign came when she went to her father's study one morning, hoping to find comfort in the familiar space. She wanted to look through his old notes, maybe even find a letter he'd left for her. But when she opened the drawers, she found gaps. Certain documents she knew had been there. Personal letters, some legal files were missing. She called the family lawyer that afternoon, hoping for reassurance. His voice, once warm and cooperative, was now clipped and evasive. "It's still being processed. Vanessa has already requested some updates." "It's complicated, Sophia." And then, as if on cue, he ended the call before she could ask more. The walls were closing in. One evening, as she passed Vanessa's private lounge, Sophia heard voices again, calm, almost smug. "It's all arranged," Vanessa was saying, her tone silk over steel. "Once Ethan is married, the empire is officially his. Sophia can't stop us." Ethan chuckled. "She won't even try. She's too naive to see it coming." Sophia's hand gripped the doorframe so tightly her knuckles turned white. She wanted to burst in and confront them, to demand they explain what they meant. But a cold realization washed over her. They already believed they'd won. They weren't afraid of her. To them, she was just a minor inconvenience. The next day, she did confront Vanessa, but not with anger, just quiet determination. "When is the will being read?" Sophia asked, her voice steady. Vanessa looked up from her tea, her expression perfectly composed. "Oh, darling, don't stress yourself over these details. You know your father wanted what's best for the family. You'll understand soon enough." The way she said family made Sophia's stomach turn. That night, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Ethan. "You were never really part of this, Sophia. Dad's gone. Mom's in charge. Stop pretending you matter." Sophia stared at the screen for a long time, her pulse pounding in her ears. The words were like a knife twisting slowly. For the first time, she felt real fury rising inside her. But still she stayed quiet. She wasn't ready to make a move. Not yet. There was still a chance this was some twisted misunderstanding. Wasn't there? And then the invitation arrived. It came in a gilded envelope sealed with gold foil and Vanessa's impeccable handwriting. The wedding of Ethan Whitmore and Isabella Crane, a celebration of love and the future of the Whitmore legacy. Sophia opened it slowly, her heart sinking as she read the final line. "We would be honored for you to join us. As our guest. Not as family, not as the daughter of Richard Whitmore. A guest." It was a formality, an afterthought, nothing more than a way to say, "We don't need you, but you can watch us win." That's when it clicked. The wedding wasn't just about Ethan marrying into another wealthy family. It was the stage they had chosen to cement their victory. It would be the perfect opportunity to parade Vanessa as the matriarch and Ethan as the rightful heir in front of 300 witnesses in the most public way possible. They wanted to erase Sophia in a single elegant evening. She put the invitation down on her desk and stared at it for a long time, the gold edges gleaming under the light. This wasn't just a family wedding. It was a declaration of war. And Sophia realized with chilling clarity, this would be the moment they planned to humiliate her completely. But what Vanessa and Ethan didn't know was that Sophia was done waiting. She wasn't going to let them write the final chapter. She would turn their stage into her own. The wedding was nothing short of a theater of excess. The ballroom glowed beneath towering golden chandeliers, every inch draped in white orchids imported from Europe. Champagne flowed in crystal fountains, and the air hummed with the quiet murmurs of 300 guests, politicians, socialites, and business tycoons, all gathered to witness the spectacle of Ethan Whitmore marrying Isabella Crane. the daughter of another influential family. Sophia arrived quietly unnoticed at first. She wore a sleek, understated black gown that contrasted starkly with the glittering opulence around her. She slipped into a seat at the back of the room, her presence blending into the shadows. But her mind was sharp alert. She had been waiting for this. The ceremony was a well-rehearsed performance. Ethan strutted in radiating smug confidence in his custom-tailored suit. Isabella was breathtaking in her couture gown, but even her beauty felt like another carefully chosen ornament to enhance the Whitmore image. Vanessa floated through the crowd like a queen basking in the admiration of the guests. Then as the orchestra softened and the bride and groom took their places, Vanessa stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice smooth and commanding, "today, we are not only celebrating the union of two extraordinary families, we are celebrating the future of the Whitmore legacy." The crowd erupted in polite applause. Cameras flashed. Vanessa smiled, her eyes glinting with a sharpness only Sophia recognized. As the rightful matriarch of this family, Vanessa continued, her tone growing more authoritative. "It is my honor to announce that my son, Ethan Whitmore, will be the sole heir to Richard Whitmore's estate, the company he built, and the family fortune." There was another round of applause, muted, more awkward this time, as the weight of her words sank in. But Vanessa wasn't done. And as for Sophia, Vanessa's lips curled into a small, practiced smile. Richard's daughter from his first marriage, she has graciously stepped aside. She understands this is not her legacy to claim. She knows this family must be led by someone who represents its true future. Sophia's stomach turned as the room went still. Then, as if on cue, a massive projection screen at the front of the ballroom flickered to life. On it appeared a document, official-looking, stamped with seals bearing her name. "I, Sophia Whitmore, hereby renounce any claim to the estate of Richard Whitmore and relinquish all rights to the family business and fortune." Her signature was at the bottom, forged in a shaky, unfamiliar version of her handwriting. Gasps rippled through the room. Guests turned in their seats, whispering. Some looked at Sophia with pity. Others narrowed their eyes with judgment, already assuming the worst. Sophia felt every gaze like a blade. She stood slowly, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might crack her ribs. But her face was calm, her posture strong. "This," she said firmly, her voice carrying through the stunned silence, "is a lie." Vanessa's smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. She spoke into the microphone with mock sympathy. "Oh, sweetheart, don't embarrass yourself. We all know you were never prepared for this kind of responsibility. Your father knew it too. You made the right decision." Ethan stepped closer to the mic, his smugness radiating off him like heat. "Dad always said you were too weak to lead. Be grateful you're even here today. At least we let you see what a real future looks like." Sophia's fists tightened at her sides, but she didn't flinch. And then Vanessa delivered the cruelest blow. Richard was confused at the end, she said, her tone sharp, deliberate. "He didn't know what was best for the family anymore. I fixed his mistake. You were never meant to lead, Sophia. You were just an afterthought." The words hung in the air like venom. Sophia felt the rage rise cold and clear, but she didn't let it spill over. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, her eyes locked on Vanessa with an expression so calm it was almost chilling. "Is that so?" she said softly, almost gently. And then she turned her gaze toward the back of the room. A small, deliberate nod. That's when the lights dimmed. The giant projection screen, still displaying the forged document, flickered, then cut to black. A heartbeat of silence filled the room. Confusion rippled through the guests. And then the screen came back to life. But this time it wasn't Vanessa's staged evidence. It was the truth. A video began to play, clear, high-definition footage of Richard Whitmore, frail but lucid in his final weeks. He was sitting in his study, his voice weak but steady. "To my daughter Sophia," he said directly into the camera, "you are the rightful heir to my entire estate. You have worked for it. You have earned it. Everything I built is yours to protect. Do not let anyone take it from you." Gasps filled the room. Then came images of the real will, notarized and dated months before his passing, naming Sophia as the sole heir to the $18 million fortune and the company. Side by side, the screen showed a comparison of the authentic signature and the forged one Vanessa had just displayed. A professional handwriting analyst narrated the differences, pointing out the clear fraud. Guests began to murmur louder, now confusion turning to shock. Next, an audio recording played Vanessa's own voice caught during one of her secret meetings. "It's all arranged. Once Ethan is married, the empire is officially his. Sophia can't stop us. The lawyer is taken care of. She won't even know what happened." Vanessa's face drained of color. Ethan froze his mouth slightly open. And then the final piece appeared on the screen, the family lawyer pale and clearly remorseful, speaking into the camera. "I was pressured by Vanessa Whitmore to alter the will and forge Sophia's renunciation. I can no longer keep this secret. The rightful heir is Sophia Whitmore. She deserves everything her father intended for her." The room erupted into chaos. Guests gasped. Some clutched their pearls. Others pulled out their phones, recording everything, already knowing this would hit the headlines before the night was over. The bride stepped away from Ethan, horror written across her face. "You lied to me," she whispered before ripping off her veil and storming out of the ballroom, her family following her. Ethan stumbled forward. This is fake. She's lying." But before he could say more, two uniformed officers stepped into the ballroom, their voices clear and authoritative. "Vanessa Whitmore. Ethan Whitmore, you are under investigation for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to embezzle the Whitmore estate. We need you to come with us." Vanessa shook her head violently, panic finally cracking her composure. "No, this is a setup. You can't do this." "I am the matriarch." "Not anymore," Sophia said quietly, her voice cutting through Vanessa's protests. As the officers approached, Vanessa's screams grew more desperate. Ethan, pale and trembling, tried to protest, but the evidence was undeniable. The crowd parted as they were escorted out, cameras flashing, whispers turning into a roar of scandal. Sophia stood still in the center of the room, calm amidst the chaos. She didn't need to say anything else. The truth had spoken for her. In that moment, the stage Vanessa had set for Sophia's humiliation became the stage for her downfall. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Gasps and frantic whispers rippled through the crowd like a wave. Phones were raised, capturing every moment as the once perfect wedding unraveled before their eyes. The music that had filled the air just moments ago was replaced by a tense silence, broken only by the soft, nervous murmurs of the stunned guests. Vanessa's face went pale, her carefully crafted mask of elegance cracking under the weight of the truth now blazing across the massive screen. Her lips parted, searching for words, but nothing came. Ethan, usually so full of arrogant confidence, stood frozen like a child caught in a lie, his hands trembling at his sides. The bride's eyes widened in disbelief as she turned to Ethan. "Is this true?" she whispered, voice barely audible over the rising noise of the room. Ethan stammered, his mouth opening and closing without forming a coherent response. His fiancée recoiled, her face twisted with disgust, and then without another word she ripped off her veil and stormed out of the ballroom. Her family followed swiftly, dragging their shocked expressions behind them like shadows. Sophia didn't move. She stood like a pillar of calm in the eye of the storm, her posture steady, her face unreadable. She didn't need to say anything. Everything she had planned, the evidence, the recordings, the confessions, was speaking louder than her voice ever could. That's when the officers stepped forward, the weight of their presence cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Vanessa Whitmore," the lead officer said firmly, his voice carrying across the room. "You are under investigation for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to embezzle funds from the Whitmore estate." The crowd gasped louder. People stepped back as Vanessa stumbled, her heels clicking helplessly against the polished floor. She shook her head wildly, her hands trembling. "No! This is a mistake. You can't do this." But the officer didn't pause. He turned his gaze to Ethan. "And Ethan Whitmore, you are also under investigation for knowingly benefiting from fraudulent documents. You will need to come with us for questioning." Ethan's face drained of all color. No, wait. I didn't know anything." He cried, but his protests were weak hollow, easily drowned out by the sea of cameras now pointed directly at him. Vanessa tried to push past the officers, her voice rising into a shrill panic. "I'm the matriarch of this family. This is my house, my legacy. She set this up. She's lying." Sophia finally spoke, her tone calm but sharp enough to cut through Vanessa's hysteria. "No," she said quietly. "It was you who lied, and you just lied to the wrong audience." Vanessa froze at Sophia's voice. For the first time, real fear flickered in her eyes. The officers moved in. Vanessa's protests grew weaker as they placed a hand on her arm, guiding her toward the exit. Ethan followed his steps, heavy, his composure shattered. The guests parted like a tide, some clutching their pearls, others whispering frantically into their phones. As Vanessa was led past Sophia, she locked eyes with her one last time. There was no charm left, no polished exterior, only raw, bitter rage. "This isn't over," Vanessa hissed. Sophia tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "Oh, it's over," she said softly. "It ended the moment you underestimated me." And with that, Vanessa was gone, escorted out of the ballroom in front of the same people she had once sought to impress. The room was silent for a long moment. Then slowly the guests began to scatter, some too ashamed to meet Sophia's eyes, others offering quiet nods of respect as they passed her. Within hours, the story exploded across every media outlet. Headlines flashed: high society wedding turned scandal, stepmother and son, arrested for 18 millions. Inheritance fraud. Vanessa's name, once synonymous with glamour, became a public spectacle of disgrace. Ethan's reputation crumbled overnight, his social circle abandoning him in an instant. Meanwhile, the legal system moved swiftly. The court reinstated Richard Whitmore's authentic will, officially naming Sophia as the rightful heir to the $18 million fortune and the family empire. All of Vanessa and Ethan's fraudulent actions were laid bare, leaving no room for their lies to survive. Sophia, however, didn't celebrate with grand gestures. She didn't throw a party or issue a gloating statement. She simply signed the necessary documents, reclaimed what her father had entrusted her with, and walked away from the mansion that had been more prison than home for so many years. She didn't move back into the cold halls Vanessa once ruled. Instead, she sold the estate and the excess luxury that came with it. With the proceeds, she set up a foundation in her father's name, a legacy to support young entrepreneurs who had no family connections or wealth to rely on, just like Richard had once been. For the first time in years, Sophia allowed herself to breathe. She moved into a quiet, sunlit home by the coast, surrounded by only the people who had truly stood by her side. A few distant relatives who had remained neutral reached out, offering quiet words of support. Old friends she thought she had lost reconnected, telling her they admired her strength. And through it all, she realized something important: she didn't need Vanessa or Ethan's approval. She didn't need their definition of family. She had built something better, a future free of their shadows. Sophia never forgave them. Forgiveness was never the goal. The goal was justice, and justice had been served in the most undeniable way possible. She stood on the balcony of her new home one evening, the ocean stretching endlessly before her, and whispered to herself the words her father had once told her. "You're the only one I trust to keep this family together." Now she finally understood. Keeping the family together didn't mean protecting those who sought to destroy it. It meant protecting the truth, even when it hurt. And with that, Sophia closed the door on the past for good. In the aftermath, the Whitmore name became a headline for all the wrong reasons. Vanessa was arrested, charged with fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. The woman who once dripped with social power was now splashed across every news outlet as a cautionary tale. Her glamorous reputation crumbled overnight, her so-called friends abandoning her as fast as they'd once clung to her parties. Ethan didn't fare any better. His wedding was called off within hours of the scandal breaking. His fiancée's family severed ties immediately, their disgust made public when they released a statement condemning his actions. The invitations that had once brought him into high society were revoked. The phone stopped ringing, and the people who had always praised him now whispered about him as a fool who threw everything away. The press devoured the story. Headlines were relentless: high society wedding exposed as a 18 fraud scandal. Stepmother and son arrested in inheritance scheme. True heir, Sophia Whitmore, reclaims legacy in stunning public reveal. And while the world was busy talking, the courts moved swiftly. The authentic will was reinstated without question. Every detail of Richard's true wishes was honored, naming Sophia as the rightful heir to his entire estate and the family business. But Sophia didn't return to the cold halls of the Whitmore mansion. She didn't want to live in a place that had been soaked in years of lies and manipulation. Instead, she sold the mansion and many of the family's unnecessary luxury assets. With part of the money, she created something meaningful, a foundation in her father's name. It was dedicated to supporting young entrepreneurs who, like Richard, once had started with nothing but determination. It was a legacy that carried his true spirit, not the hollow image Vanessa had tried to create. Sophia chose a new home by the ocean. It wasn't massive or ostentatious, but it was beautiful in its simplicity, a place filled with light, quiet mornings and the freedom she'd never known before. She reconnected with people who had quietly stood by her all along, those who cared for her without conditions. Maya, her loyal friend, who had helped gather the evidence and stayed by her side through every painful moment, remained a constant presence. Together they built something honest from the ashes of the lies Sophia had endured. Over time, a few distant relatives who had stayed neutral reached out. Some apologized for not taking her side sooner. Others simply expressed their respect for how she had handled the betrayal with such quiet strength. Sophia welcomed their support, but never relied on it. She no longer needed validation from anyone tied to the old version of her life. Most importantly, Sophia learned something she would never forget. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by loyalty, by the people who show up when it matters, by those who would never use your love as a weapon against you. She never forgave Vanessa or Ethan. Forgiveness was never the goal. They became nothing more than shadows, ghosts of a life that no longer had power over her. Standing on the balcony of her oceanfront home one evening, she watched the waves roll in and felt an unfamiliar calm settle over her. For the first time in years, she wasn't holding her breath. She wasn't fighting to prove her worth to anyone. She had won not just the inheritance, but her freedom, her peace, and the ability to finally live life on her own terms. And now she turns the question outward to you. If you were me, would you have forgiven them? Or would you have let them fall the way I did? Because sometimes justice isn't about revenge. It's about making sure the truth is seen, and that the people who tried to destroy you can never hurt anyone again.